Tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou e te whānau, e wakarongo mai, e te korimako o Taranaki, and e mā taki ana i Facebook. We're really glad to have Debbie Ngarewa-Packer back with us, always so useful for us with the information. Tēnā koe e te rangatira.
Tēnā koe ngā mihi kea koe me tā tātou whānau ki tā mā taki tēnei hotaka i te ata nei. Nō reira, kia ora koutou, ko te tūmanako kaura, te āhua, te wairua o koutou katoa.
Ngā mihi. Well, Debbie, we've here in Taranaki at least made it to level 3. What effect does that have on the iwi response here in Taranaki, perhaps especially in the south?
Well, tuatahi ngā mihi aroha ki tā tātou whānau kirimati te whānau maruera. Moi rā i te rangatira Uncle Tigges. Ai, kura koutou katoa, me tā tātou whānau kei wangatamotu. So I guess, Craig, that's probably a start, to be honest. We made it through level 4 and we now find ourselves in level 3 with still restrictions. Here in the south, we've just had one of our tino rangatira ringawera, Uncle Tigges Maruera, pass away. And so we've spent this morning, which is why I was late, trying to tautoko the whānau and do what our whānau pani need to happen. So I guess it's great that we've been able to make it at level 4 with no one Mawiwi from Delta. But of course, there's still restrictions on a lot of our lives and how we assert our rangatiratanga, apply our tikanga, hei mana whenua. And I guess that's been the concerns the whole way through. So these on the ground, there's a lot of movement and angst in trying to apply the defences, stay home and increase the vaccination rate. And I guess also, this week, ngā iwi o Taranaki are mobilising to help some of our whānau who've been in touch to ask for tautoko for kai and to connect to the services that they need to. So these, you never go through kaupapa like this without having whānau endure hardship, and I think that's a focus for us as well around.
And just briefly, for tangihanga, that's still limited to just 10 people at the moment.
Yeah, it's limited to 10. Even harder, you still have to apply for exemption to have our taonga released from the undertakers. So there's a lot of confusion on being able to take our taonga back to marae. And so there's still quite a bit of bureaucracy to go through, which is frustrating to deal with. But we're everyone. I think this has been the āhua, just stay calm and use the different whānau that you have around you who have influence into some of those places. And I guess that's where our ability to work together and to use the strengths that we have to get through.
Okay. And you talked about that help with the likes of Kai cranking up a bit more under level 3 than was possible under 4.
Yeah, it is. Look, I know the government's, it's been a bit disappointing, to be honest, because they've ignored some of the response efforts that worked really well in lockdown 1 and 2 in 2020. And a lot of the investment have been put into Pākehā Kai structure, such as food banks and things like that, in kei te paitera. But we also know within ourselves as whānau hapu and iwi that we have sight of these tautoko, and there's not the same sense of wakamā when you are asking or talking to your own. So ngā iwi o Taranaki have identified that and are responding. Most of the iwi that I know across the motu, actually, not just us, have have stood up 0800 lines to be able to stay connected. So, still that amazing resilience and extension of manaaki that's going on the ground. And I guess for grassroots people like me who happen to have political roles as well, it's been really important to cut through some of the traffic to once again make sure that sight is given to those on the front line, whether they be doing kai phone calls to our whānau or on the front line doing vaccination. There just hasn't been, sadly, the resourcing that's necessary to our own grass, response efforts. And certainly we've been using our political roles and our influential roles to bring that to the attention of the Crown.
So you're saying that's happening less this time round, despite lessons learned, it's happening less. What is that, caution over Delta, or what would you say?
I think I think that there's still a large degree of insecurity by the Crown to acknowledge the role of grassroots whānau, hapu and iwi response efforts, and it's sadly lacking the recognition and the follow through of resourcing. So to date, we haven't had a single cent from the government. We've had one phone call from Te Arawhiti to ask how we're going, and we're just like, oh, how do you think we're going? Once again, and I guess, I think that the Crown has largely failed in how they've supported Maori and addressed inequities. We see a vaccination uptake that is absolutely dismal. We have a lot of our whānau sitting on the fence. I get it. I get that we've got some who definitely will vaccinate and some who definitely will never. Hate to pai tera. But actually we've got a large proportion of our population here even that just will never know what decision to make, because there just hasn't been the education, there hasn't been the communication, there just hasn't been the degree of connecting with our grassroots people. And that's time, our whānau, we've got our providers out there trying to plug in and backfill where actually it should have happened months ago. So, we were critical of the inequities in the first two lockdowns. I think the inequities are worse this time round. There has been absolute centralisation of resourcing and decision making that now we don't have to fight to prove that we're on the ground. Actually, they know who we all are, but there has been, again, no resourcing, nothing at all that's happened.
So they've had time to sort of get their ducks in a row to be able to set up their systems and just say, look, it's easier for us if we ignore you, blunder on through. Well, perhaps blunder's a bit harsh, but to trample on through,
I think so. I mean, I get the focus needs to be on Tamaki Makaurau, absolutely. In fact, there should have been a strategy, given that they were the epicenter. They're who have to hold the COVID at the borders. They're who have to host the MIQs, the large proportion of MIQs. So there should have been a strategy that focused on Tamaki Makaurau first and foremost. Our largest population is there. But the other side of it is, we've had since May, June to learn. Have a look at it. The Maori pandemic response plan from the government hasn't changed since June last year. The vaccination plan doesn't connect in. There's a huge disconnect between what the government should be doing and what we're doing and on the ground. And so I think the frustrations, I think the last time we fought because we were just so shocked. This time, I think we're just not shocked and we're just getting on and doing it. And again, there is no plan imminent on how they're going to address the growing gap between Maori who are not vaccinated, and I think it was 30.1% of Maori or 30.7% of Maori have had one jab compared to 57% others. So it's growing. The gap's widened in the last 2 weeks. So that's my concern. But the vaccination is just a slice of the inequities pie. The inequities continue to grow here on the ground, and in the south we're certainly seeing it. But we're just getting on and backfilling and looking after our whānau and trying to get the messaging across and help everyone out.
Yeah, so what is happening sort of within whānau, help for older people or maybe others that are vulnerable? Is that where a lot of the practical help is going on.
Yeah, it is. I think first and foremost, the communication's going on. We believe in, manaaki is the most important thing for us. We believe that. I think it generally as whānau hapu, as Te Pāti Māori even, we believe that. So what's going on is the regular discussions, and if we make sure that we have an engagement that is intimate and being able to regularly connect those and advocate for those that need it, which is what we've been doing. So these oranga tamariki, for example, the necessity to have support for our respite carers, the support that we need to make sure that those who are still involved in other connections with the Crown are getting support. But I think probably like everyone else though as well, is that there's such a chasm of information. The risk is that everyone's just turning off, and so we've become the info centre. I know being an MP who's not in government, that I'm consistently asked to interpret the latest. What does this level mean, fire? Can we do this, fire? What's it? And I'm thinking, Christ. So I think the most important thing that everyone's doing is dismantling the chains of confusion, dismantling the blocks, the obstacles that are creating anxiety, and trying to show a clear way path and give some calm advice. And so I think that's what we've always done, and that's what we continue to do in whatever sphere of influence we have.
Working on trust.
Yeah.
So the likes of MSD, they've not really been in touch to coordinate their efforts?
Well, we've had whānau that have recorded and sent us their recordings of how long they've been on hold with MSDs. We've had whānau that are getting mixed messages from the employers and then go to MSD and are not able to hear from them. I think, and to be honest, that's not just MSD, that's actually MOH and DHBs, the Healthline. There's a lot of confusion. So, and I guess the other side of it too is, we saw this with the whole anti-vaxxer mentality, is that it's been, when you talk about that high trust model, it's actually been really difficult to navigate around some of the untrustworthy advice and communications as well. So I think that's one thing that's been going really well. I saw Liana Potu went live and posted a mihi to our Tamaki Makaurau whānau and a mihi to remind at what level 3 is. And I think those are been really great, grassroots ways of us all championing together and navigating through a really scary time. We see the cases up to 80 a day, and then goes to 49, and you get a whole sense of, yay, I'm safe. And then it goes up to 70 something a day. You go, oh my gosh, this isn't like, we've been educated to focus on the curve and the curve going down instead of this whole bouncing mentality. So I think the real thing that's been disappointing, and I'll say this as a political leader and a grassroots leader, is that there are actually no Maori politicians speaking out. I mean, there's certainly Pāti Māori, but within government, you're not sort of, and I don't know whether that would be listened to either, but I definitely think that we're having to wakapiki each other and find, practical ways of communicating. And thank goodness for you guys, Te Kore Mako.
So if you had, the old magic wand, what would you like if, to come it from the other end, how it would be most helpful? What would that look like?
So I think the first thing is that, given how far behind we are in the vaccination space, I would have created lanes and VIP lanes for Māori only. So, and I would have said that this is the stand-up response. If you're Māori, you rock up and you just cut straight through and you go in. Now, that's how we're going to be able to increase. When you've got cars and van loads with 2 or 3 generations in one vehicle waiting, up to 5-6 hours, they're not going to sustain that long. I don't know when the last time you were in a car for hours before your mokos and your rangatahi, but it's pretty big deal. So I think that all barriers to when you do make a decision, and it's a big decision. This household, we had massive debates on whether we get vaccinated or not, massive debates, and we still have some that aren't are not comfortable. So in this household, though, when you make that decision, you want to go and get done straight away, not get told you have to wait till October or Sunday afternoon and then queue with 5 or 6. So I think immediate barriers was what we would have done and made it accessible. The other thing that I would do is, for goodness sake, stop swamping social media with all their yellow and white messaging and repeating what every other mainstream media is saying. Cut the traffic and actually adopt a communication strategy and plan that reflected to who they really need to, which is those of us who are in the inequity space. They should also have engaged in, if the Prime Minister is going to stand up, then kei te pai, then get a trustworthy group of others that are able to give an interpretation of what's being said. And I think there's just such a mistrust of the messengers. There's a mistrust of Ministry of Health, and go figure. We all knew that. We all knew that the health model's not working for us, which is why the Māori Health Authority is something that was having our own Māori health approach. So I think that some of the bureaucrats needed to get out of the way. And the most critical thing that I would have done is actually said to our Māori providers and to our grassroots response effort, what do you need to scale up? What do you need to look after your communities? And I would have funded that and stopped wasting money funding messages out of Wellington and strategies out of Wellington and get out of the way. That's what I would have done. And it's actually the same advice I gave for the first lockdown and the second lockdown. Our grassroots, our communities, they know how to look after themselves. And if they're resourced to, they can do it really, really well. But I think we're in a deficit situation at the moment, and I'm a little bit disappointed that some of our whanaunga in Labour haven't lobbied that and initiated that. We now see prisons. We have a prison warden and corrections. We found positive. That now makes me really worry about the state of our whānau, even inside, who have been moved during level 4. So I think that we've been the most left out and expendable population, and it really worries me.
Do you know, I did find some good news on the vaccination front, here in Taranaki at least. The figures are slightly old, only up till the 19th of August, so before that big mass essential workers push on the weekend. But older Māori, 50 plus, were actually getting vaccinated at a faster rate than non-Māori. So for 50 plus, about 95% of the dose 1, but over 110% for the non-Māori rate. But for the younger ones, not so good news, 30 to 49, only around 2/3 of the non-Māori rate, and under 30 is just half the non-Māori rate. So that reluctance seems to be, especially amongst the young ones. Have you detected that?
No, I think, first of all, the numbers are a little bit cagey in the fact that, look, 71% of Māori population are under 40, 23 or 25% are under 20. So comparatively, we don't have the same mortality rate as Pākehā. And so therefore, we don't have the same quantity. The amounts that we have are a lot less. So that worries me, that we have a high young profile population who actually haven't even been targeted until recently for the vaccination program. And given that we have, given that we have this huge difference, what concerns me of places like Stratford that are doing mass, sorry, my moko, would you mind closing Nan's door? What concerns me is my Kisnan, is that those that are able to, to get vaccinated, safe and mass vaccinations, they're just around the country, they're not working for Māori. So 1,400 or 1,500 vaccinated in Stratford and 140 were Māori. So
that sort of reflects the population there, perhaps, though.
It does, but again, why are we doing that then? I think that's my point, is that, okay, so if that's the case, then, and we all know that's the case, then what's the plan B? So I guess those are what things that worry me. I'm just going to close my curtain. It's like, oh, the sun coming through.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry. It's quite lovely, but yeah, it doesn't happen in the other.
Yeah, sure. Hey, all good, all good. Yeah, so the young ones, I can't look past, I guess, the impact of social media and some of the quality of information on there. Do you think that's a significant issue here, or is something else at play?
I think a few things. I think, look, after years of colonisation and intergenerational trauma, we are easily caught up in conspiracy theories and stories easily, and given our
suspicion
history,
of authorities.
Absolutely, and given our I'm going to try and move again. Sorry, given our given our the way that we've been, I'm not surprised that we are hearing kōrero like that. The difference is, though, who's been the alternative voice? Like, who else is talking to us in the absence of that? And what we find as Māori politicians and leaders is we're having to. And I'm like, of course, we're not going to trust a public health response, because Māori inequities in health have been plaguing us for ages. So I guess that identifies the high mistrust that we have as tangata whenua in any type of authority. But the other side of it is that there is a dangerous culture internationally growing of those who are using the not so informed or the easily following conspiracy to actually take out Indigenous peoples. And that's what concerns me. There's a whole case of that going on, and often those that are driving this sort of fear strategy have alternative models, have alternative agendas, and they're not in favour of Indigenous peoples. And I just don't think that there's enough realisation of that.
Despite the difficulties, would social media be the place to reach the younger ones?
Oh, sorry, I'm just trying to get me into a place where I'm not getting blocked by the sun. That might be better. Yeah. Sorry, Craig, what was that? I'm chasing away from Māori.
Social media kind of problematic, but is that the place to reach the younger ones as well? Or do you think it needs more like within whānau, kanohi ki te kanohi?
Oh, I think social media is the platform, in fact, and I get the benefits of having great social media relationships. But the consequence of that is that I know myself, and I've spoken about this in New Zealand Herald, is the trolling and the way that the doxing and stuff is happening. We have not been informed enough and educated enough on how to do that. And I just think that, again, it's a little bit reflective of credible sources of information and credible relationships on social media. And, that's the consequence of mass socialization, is that you actually have to learn firsthand and be well informed. I think Māori have gotten around that by having lots of ohu, so these different collective groups and pages that you can belong to, which is no different to villages on the ground. So we have villages on the ground, collectives, hapu, whānau, sports, whatever that we belong to, that help keep us connected and close to credible sources of relationships and information. But that's not always available, and we're relatively still new to the whole social media pros and cons. But I definitely think that there has been an anti-Indigenous movement, and it has been able to get leverage off the COVID situation. And we just have to be really aware as whānau, what would be the ultimate reason that somebody would start kōrero about something that can be a form of defence. There's nothing that's 99%, proof for foolproof. But what if you ask yourself, what would somebody starting this conspiracy theory hope to gain? And I think I look at my aunties and uncles who are given advice, and they've birthed and buried our families for generations. And then I look at these others who have suddenly become experts for Māori or Indigenous kaupapa, and I think that's what you've got to do is, check, look at them. Are they pono and tika? Do they really have your backs? Where were they during Mururo Patu? Were they here with us? And so often we'll sit there and say, reflect on your wakapapa and reflect on your allies, and then consider that when you're taking information on board.
I heard you speak with Taorangi earlier in the week, saying that an alternative was to sort of envision what would happen within your whānau if COVID hit hard. That was perhaps a convincing picture that could overcome that more abstract stuff online.
Yeah, look, I think that if we just silence all the traffic, and sometimes we don't do that enough, sometimes we don't unplug enough, but again, and this was a debate our whānau had, because you can imagine what the table's like with 14 at the kai table every night, and sometimes I think, and more recently, but I think the thing that was our convince is that we sat there and thought, okay, it doesn't matter whether we vaccinate or not. What matters is actually what is our collective responsibility to make sure that we never end up in a situation where we have been exposed to Delta and it's airborne, and we can't all be together. If our mokos were in hospital, I wouldn't be allowed to go in and nurse them, or my kids. I wouldn't be able to be with my husband. If my husband had to go to MIQ and someone was in hospital, and it would just split us up. And we don't get a broken arm without all turning up there in droves. Baby, we're all there waiting for that moko. That's how we roll. We're really old school, but that's actually how we have each other's back. So if we never leave. Mum broke her knee a couple of years ago. We were at the hospital morning and night. We never leave each other, and I guess we still carry the trauma of when our tupuna were taken forcibly away from us and died, and were left in Dunedin. We never got to awhi them. We never got to bury them. So we're sure as hell not going to do that now without a great big fight. And so that was why we visualized the end. We visualized the worst case scenario. And so it was a hard decision for us to do whatever we have to do. And that meant vaccinating. Now, I'm not saying anyone should do anything other than visualize how you would cope in the worst case scenario. And at the moment, we're watching a whānau try to bury their papa in really restrained situations. So, yeah, I think that sometimes we have to visit those we have to visualize that so that we can actually be true to ourselves and make decisions, not on what everyone on social media is saying, on what your tolerance and your ability to look after your own whānau is.
On the positive side, the Māori health providers seem to be doing well. The figures I got from Tui Order just for yesterday, up to yesterday, 4,000 odd vaccinations they've done, 31% Māori overall, especially high in Waitara, 42%. Are those figures similar for Ngāti Ruanui Health?
Well, Ngāti Ruanui Health has now moved to the fact that they have concentrated 2 to 3 days a week on Māori only. So we're 100% vaccinating Māori in Ngāti Ruanui Uri only, and that was our aggressive response to try and narrow the gap. And we've done our duty. We've been looking after our tangata tiriti, our whānau around here, our wider community. We now needed to internalise and look after ourselves. And I think that's, the pleasing results are that up until the end of last week, Ngāti Ruanui, Ngā Ruihine Iwi Authority Health and Tui Order had combined done more than 50% of the population being Māori. Ngā Ruihine and Ngāti Ruanui on the ground here have been completely focused on our Māori. And that's what I actually think the Māori providers need to do now. So I think it's important that Tui Order turns that around and does 100% Māori, and that we spend a few days a week doing that. Until we can, from, again, last week, the stats were that Taranaki actually had the lowest or second to lowest vaccination rate for Māori. Now, that's really concerning because we're in lockdown level 4. And if we're to listen to Sir David Skeggs, who was correct for this time, he's predicting we'll have another breakout before Christmas, and we'll have another lockdown pre-Christmas. So I think we got a little bit complacent, and maybe I think the government got a little bit complacent, and certainly health did, in where its response in to Delta was. And I don't think we can ever relax that again. It's around for a long time.
Okay, and speaking of relaxing, no travel allowed between regions in level 3 without special reason, basically. Is there any likelihood, any need for the highway checkpoints that we saw last year?
Yeah, I think there is actually, and I am expecting that the police have got a handle on it. I say that as I see in the CBAC summary that there has been concern expressed by the police on the amount of interregional travel from the north Taranaki during level 4. So I think it's I've got whānau that live on the main route, and they said the traffic in the last 2 to 3 days has really increased, like it's back to again. So yeah, I do think that an important part of keeping the region safe is containing Auckland, and then making sure that there's compliance. And when we did the iwi checkpoints last year, the amount of interregional Taranaki. And so I think it's really important that they keep that up.
Sorry, you cut out there slightly. Could you just go over again what happened last year?
So last year, the stats proved that there was a huge interregional travel through the northern borders and the southern borders. And I think it's really important that the officials are actively controlling interregional travel, particularly out of Auckland and around Auckland. We're still seeing numbers that suggest Delta's not contained. And I know they're saying it's contained in Auckland. The thing that worries me in everything that we're doing, and this includes the traffic and the vaccination and the containment, is we have 200,000 people that are not registered in with a national health organisation. They don't have an NHI number. 50% of that 200,000 are Maori. So I guess what I'm alluding to is that we still have a large population that are not on anyone's books, not on any radar to get vaccinated. And that tells me that we have a high percentage of risk amongst Māori. We need to contain movement. And I personally feel, the Daily News quoted me incorrectly. I actually didn't say I was comfortable with level 3. I said that I would prefer to so that I'll provide vaccinate more. I personally feel like we've come too early.
Okay. I know when earlier we spoke, a wee while ago now, you had some reluctance about iwi being too mobile out there in the community to deliver welfare, to consider things like checkpoints because of the nature of the Delta variant. Are you still that way, or if there were checkpoints, would you be happy for iwi to be involved on the roadside?
I think it's up to individual iwi to determine that. For us, the vulnerabilities that exist in our communities are really high. And so I think if the vaccination rate for Māori was up, if we weren't dealing with Delta variant, which we are, and we had access to real-time information and a DHB that would give us that real-time information. For example, we have 200 odd that were on a contact list, and none of us quite know how they've been managed, how they're complying, whether they're getting welfare support. So I think there's too many gaps in our existing regional strategies to put iwi at risk. It needs to be monitored by officials who have all, I think, all the ability to do that. So yeah, I still very much have you, and I think that our focus needs to be on our own whānau hapu and iwi right now. We took hits the last lockdown, and actually it was not appreciated. In fact, the very mayor that now said, we should have iwi checkpoints, I sort of had a bit of I think we all had a bit of a hoot to ourselves and thought, well, you didn't like it last time. So you are largely on the front line for the vaccination. Māori are on the front. Māori providers are extending out of their skin, and once again, the Māori response efforts for Manaaki, for giving support, our 0800 lines have been working 24/7. I think that we're doing more than enough.
Okay, great. And you've seen, or people on the borders have seen, some increase already.
Yeah.
I mean, I think last time, I'm not sure what the situation was here in Taranaki, but iwi were the first to kind of push for checkpoints and in a way force police into action. You're not thinking that will be necessary this time, that police are up to speed with what's needed?
I know, I think it's very necessary, but I think that it's actually the government resourcing and the government organisations and officials that need to front it. I think, iwi are punching above their weight and doing too much as it is. And again, we're the most at risk. Our communities have not got a vaccination rate high enough to justify the risk.
Okay. Hey, look, thank you, Debbie, for your ongoing work and for being in touch with us again and filling people in. I know it's a time of sort of continued anxiety for some people. We get a little bit stuck in our houses and, it all becomes a little bit same, doesn't it? That pipeline of information coming at us.
Yeah,
so
it does.
Lovely to put a face on it and to hear your thoughts again. Good luck to your whānau. Thanks again for your time.
Anytime. Ka kite.
Ka kite. Matua.